What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the podcast. Hello, how are you today? As we hear sirens in the background of my intro, today's guest is a very funny comedian by the name of Clint Couchie. You can find him at Sly-ish on all the social medias, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, I imagine. He is a comedian that started doing comedy in Sudbury, Ontario, and then has been making his way to London, Ontario, where he performs regularly and has a show every Wednesday night at Frankenfurters in London, Ontario. It's a great show. It's a fun show. The food there is fantastic, actually. So if you're ever in London, Ontario, and want to check out some great food and some great comedy, come check it out. That being said, we talk about his journey to being a comedian, his struggles, with trying to find his voice on stage, and we talk a lot about a lot of different things, and it's a great conversation. So I hope you guys enjoy this conversation with Mr. Clint Couchie.
I am gonna headline at the Comedy Bar tonight on this show called Got Land, and it's all Indigenous comics from like Ontario mostly, and then apparently we got one guy, just a civilian on there too, so it should be good.
I hope the civilian is like, so white people, right?
Well, and I'm like, man, we all got to talk about this, right? I'm like, we got to talk about the fact that there's a white guy in the show, and that's the only way they let us have a show or whatever. We got to think of something, right?
Again, what if it's like, oh, my girlfriend is Aboriginal? So like, I know what you guys have to do.
I've heard, I think, I want to say like Pete Zedlacker, I think his woman is Nish, and I've heard him talk like that on stage before.
I've always thought like, I feel like it'd be very intimidating. Like the most intimidating culture to be a part of would be the Maori culture. Like say I was a white guy and I started dating a girl whose family is all about the native culture of Hawaii or Samoa and everything. And they're like, all right, come on, do you want to try the Hawkeye? I'm like, no.
Totally, man.
I do not need to do that. I feel like I would be offensive if I tried that. It's like, no, come on, you'll get the face paint. No, I'm good. You guys, I don't want to get in trouble.
Whereas, my wife's family was just happy I could light a fire, right? So
with sticks and stones.
No, just with some damn matches. They were just like, just don't screw that up. So
why do you have matches? I smoke weed. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, well, welcome to the podcast, Clint. I'm here with Clint Couchie here on the Hello, How Are You Today podcast. Welcome, my friend. You got a show coming out at the Comedy Bar in Toronto. That's we were kind of just briefly talking about, like, so my first question is like, you're is it Native American or Indigenous, or is it both?
Well, like everybody else, people like using the word Indigenous, and I'm fine with that. We all like to call ourselves Indians most of the time when we're just being hanging out. But there's an Indigenous comedy show tonight. I think there's probably about 5 or 6 of us. And I'm gonna close out the show, so it'll be great to go meet some new folks, hear what they're talking about, and see if what I'm talking about is relevant to today.
And we're filming this on Saturday, October 23rd. So this will be past or a pretense for the show and everything. But like, does that, not that it bothers you, but is it weird where like it's like, oh, we only have a specific show for a specific thing? Or do you need shows like that every once in a while?
I think it's an awesome opportunity, and I like. Especially I've been doing it for a little while, so I'm able to better incorporate my viewpoints into my stories. But you do shows with me. I mean, most of the time we're out in a bar with 10 or 20 people that don't necessarily know they showed up for comedy, and chances are there's nobody in the crowd that's Indigenous, or maybe there is, but that's how you hone your comedy, right? So that's how I've always had to hone my comedy. So I've had other opportunities to jump in front of like a crowd of Indigenous people, and I wouldn't ever say it was horrible, but it's always like a learning experience, and it's always a little different to think about perspective and how you get those folks to relate to your stories, whereas most of the time the feedback I'm getting on my material and my ideas is from non-Indigenous people in non-Indigenous spaces, right? So it's it's almost like trying new material. Like, I mean, tonight I've got some things and some viewpoints on some of my bits that I'm going to talk about on stage for the first time. And it's like trial by fire, first time in front of these people. And I'm going to try different stuff because, yeah, when I sit there and I think about my stories, they're from a different viewpoint sometimes.
Yeah, because like you're originally from Thunder Bay, right?
And so just outside North Bay. So it's from Nipissing First Nation is where I'm from. But yeah, up in the north there a little bit.
I have to imagine that that's a totally different comedy scene, if there even is one up there.
So when I started doing comedy, I went up there to work, and I left my family in London. So I just went up there and I grabbed a place, and I was coming home on weekends. And I'd hired some comedians for a couple gigs, like through my work, and talked with them. And they were Indigenous folks, and they're like, "You like comedy way too much. You should write it, try it." And I kind of always had that bug in my ear. And when I was up there, I wrote out a couple bits, and I practiced them out. And I had my little cards, like they would tell you not to do now. And I drove like 90 minutes to Sudbury one night to an open mic, and I didn't tell anybody. And I tried some of my jokes, and it wasn't so bad, right? Like everybody talks about dying their first time. I think I have the video for it. It wasn't the greatest, but like a round of golf, if you get one par or one birdie, it's enough to keep you coming back. And I got a couple laughs on a couple of my ideas, and yeah, I just kept going back. Got that feeling we all get when we enjoy comedy, and we get those first couple pops, right? So I just started doing comedy that way, and it was like a monthly thing. Like if you went and died and you drove home for 2 hours after a horrible set, you had a whole month to get ready for the next one or think about the last one, right? So that's kind of how comedy started. And yeah, like somebody who likes comedy, I started hitting up some of the local bars, and we started producing little shows and stuff. And it was nice not to travel to go to an open mic. Whereas now, you know, in the city here, like, geez, if you get a good night, you can do 2 or 3 shows, 2 or 3 sets in a night, and it's fantastic. But when I started out, wasn't like that at all.
So like, so how long have you actually been doing it for? Because you seem to have some, in talking to you, I can tell you've been doing it for a while, because there is that certain amount of jadedness when talking comedy.
Yeah, a little bit. Just know what to expect and like good expectations. I started in 2013, but I would say I definitely been doing comedy at different levels, right? Like when I first started, really into it, doing it every chance I got, like entering contests and festivals and whatever I could. But then I started having more kids, and just my work started taking off. And it's great when you travel for work, because you can pop in all over the country, wherever you are, and be like, "Hey, I'm a comic. Can I come do a little spot?" And it's a good way to work out. But I got to a point where I just couldn't do comedy as much anymore. And since the pandemic has started to lighten up, my work's transitioned to home. And I guess instead of being a grumpy old open micer, I've put my energy into producing some shows, running some pro shows in the city, and running some open mics. So I mean, that's been a bit of a change. So I mean, I've been writing more and trying new stuff, and just getting out there a little more than I was. I was kind of dormant for a little while, but if you like comedy, it's always there.
So how was it like? So did you start doing comedy when you had a family, or were you just married at the time?
I would have been in 2013. I probably just had a new baby, and I had like a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, and we weren't married yet. And obviously my work was a little sketchy if I was traveling around for work, but that's what I got told to do, is like write about yourself and your own life. It makes it really hard to steal your material or write other people's material into your bits. So I mean, I was I weighed about 350 back in those days. So I mean, I was writing about life as a big guy and life as a family guy, and a lot of self-deprecating stuff, which is, you know, the easier stuff to write, I guess. When you're starting out, a lot of us start with that stuff. But
you know, it's funny. You told me to you sent me a memory that you wanted me to talk about on this podcast, and we'll get to it. And I was like, "Oh, cool." And then I went down your Facebook. I was like, "Holy shit, he used to be a big one."
Yeah, I got some big pictures, right? So
I know, and I was like, and then the goatee didn't do anything for you.
that's why I don't have it now.
No, but like I think I like so with me, like I got that little baby double chin, so like I shaved recently, it was detrimental to my face, so I gotta grow this back out. But like, and like some days I'll try and rock the goatee with the beard, and I'm like, no, that just accentuates the chin underneath.
It's an interesting go as a big guy what you do to get along with it, right?
I've noticed that a lot of the bigger guys usually tend to be balding as well. They'll shave the head and then grow the big beard. It's like a small a guy with a small dick driving a big truck. I've noticed.
I was that guy. I had a nice two-door sporty coupe, and I was rocking it. That big guy. And as soon as I lost all the weight, I bought this big massive truck, and everybody teased me. But yeah, so when I started comedy and I was back home, I don't know, somebody made me go see the doctor. I mean, I talk about this on stage, and he's like, we should get you to lose all this weight. And I remember the day I went to like bariatric weight loss school. I won the Sudbury Comedy Festival that night, so I went to learn about bariatric surgery, and I sat in a classroom, mostly women, 99% women, all big ladies, and we learned all about the surgery and what they do to you, and how they check your head, and how basically it changes your life the rest of your life. I walked out of there, and then I went and got on stage, and I did 6 minutes of how I'm fat and I hate myself, and I won like $5,000, right? So that was a good day.
And so, like, let me ask this though, like, so like with the body transformation, has that helped you? Did that help you change your comedy? Because I know personally, like, whenever I'm in better shape, I think more clearly, and my material comes out better. Like I'm able to speak better.
I'll give you a different answer than you were expecting. Is I'm very lazy. And I'm a very lazy writer, and I'm just if you didn't force me to change, I wouldn't, right? So what it did was force me to change a lot of my stand-up and my approach, and do different things, and actually have to write different material to go with what change happened. So it wasn't a bad thing, but yeah, I got very comfortable being able to talk about being a big guy and life as a big guy when it changed. And I probably should talk about it more, but I went through like a total life change, right? Like I don't even look like who I used to be, right? So if I go back home now and I start talking to somebody that I see in the grocery store, they're like, who the hell are you? You're a creep, get away from me. And it's like, hey, it's me, you know? And unless I get a chance to actually say that to somebody, I've had people like, you were waving at me 2 weeks ago and I gave you the dirtiest look because I didn't know who you were. So I had to go through that.
That's gotta be kind of a cool feeling.
It is, and I used to talk about it a little bit on stage because I met my partner right when I was a big guy, and you know, she loved me then and she loves me now, but I went through this total body change, like I just hit the wheel and a random person came out, right? So I used to joke about it in that self-deprecating way of like, what were you thinking when you were dating me back then? Like maybe now I could understand, but then, like, you know, I think less of you now, right? Like I used to do all that.
It's I think it's always interesting to be the partner of the person that's lost the weight, because like they'll be very happy, but like my wife particularly, like whenever I start to get a little bit skinnier, she gets mad at me because she's like, I like that your tummy sits in the back, small on my back when we're cuddling, and I'm like, I don't like that.
And it's funny, like the persona it gives you, right? Like it's different, right? People and I used to talk about this. People call you big guy. People assume you're a macho guy. People assume you're muscular. And I'm like, no, I was a big, huge donut, man. Like there was no fight in me. There was no physical activity. And now that I'm my physical stature, I feel very tiny, right? I only weigh like 175 pounds now. So I'm physically very different, but I'm still the same person. And I still like to yap like the old person used to, right? So it's a strange, again, back to the body transformation thing. It's a weird thing. Now I'm just like a little bulldog instead of like a big fat bulldog.
But having had that struggle, has that helped your comedy or helped your professional life as well at all? Like that mental struggle of being overweight, being like, because like, listen, we live in Canada, and so like, not only were you overweight, but you're also Indigenous. Imagine like there were so many roadblocks put in front of you to like not succeed, but here you are now in London doing the damn
I
thing and
know, and
actually doing
it,
well.
well, it's a funny answer for that, right? Because they didn't really overcome any challenges, right? Like they weren't like, Clint, you need to go see the nutritionist, you need to follow a regimen, you need to get your shit together. They're like, okay, Clint, you can't get your shit together. We're gonna make it so you can't eat anymore, and maybe you'll survive, right? Like they gave me the lost cause surgery, right? Like that's what they did. So I don't know. I don't really feel like I overcame much. I appreciated what it's done for me, and I mean, obviously I didn't do it for cosmetics. I talk about my family and stuff in my stand-up. Like I did it to live longer, but yeah, I even have an interesting perspective on that, right? Because it took the easy way out, right? Like that's how I got fat, was by not taking stock of all that stuff. So how did I get out of it? I was like, hey doc, you got the surgery, I'll take that. I'll take the number one.
Oh, so you chose to do the surgery. Like I know a lot of people will not choose to do it, right?
Oh, it
They're
was
like,
totally an
oh,
option.
they'll put it off, they'll put it off until it's too late, right? So being able to actually like look in the mirror and be like, I need to get the surgery done and get it done, and just getting it done is something to, there's something to say about that.
Yeah, no, I went and seen him, and he walked me through it all, and I found out, you know, everything else about myself, sleep apnea, all that other jazz, and they fixed it all. But I don't know. I felt more of a cop out than I did of taking the hard road, because now I have pals. Like I've got a few buddies that have done like huge weight transformations, and even some of the comics in the comedy scene, like just started pumping iron during the pandemic and taking care of themselves. And you see these guys at shows now, and they're in amazing shape, and it's like, yeah, I probably could have done that too.
Yeah,
But
Doug Swillis has gotten jacked, that's for sure.
oh, Koning, that's Dougie. Yeah.
So you started comedy in Thunder Bay, kind of just like doing an open mic 9 minutes away, and then you started booking your own shows. How, when was it like the first time someone said, hey, like you got booked for a show? Like how, take me back to that time where someone's like, hey, you have some talent, do you want to come do some time on this one?
It's comedy is an interesting thing, right? Because some of those opportunities aren't what you think. So for example, like being in a small place like that, we would have comedians from down south come through, and with the world of Facebook, right, it's easy to find out who does comedy in the little town, and you'd get a message saying, hey, we're going to book this hall, you're a local. And you know, that's a thing for booking, right? You put a local on the show, they bring a table full of people out, and you get experience that way, right? So I started getting experience just networking in the comedy scene, and kind of just working and putting my name out there and getting picked up to get put on shows, and just being reliable, right? You get a few laughs, you keep working on your material, somebody will put you on as an opener. So work the open mic scene. This Sudbury comedy scene was really good because they had a little festival every year, so we could all work on our material and go in that. And I would say to you, that taught me how to trim all my material down. So what I mean by that is, like, when I first started, I'd tell a big long story, and maybe I'd get 2 or 3 pops towards the end. And when you get ready to go do like 5 minutes of like a little festival or a competition, what I started doing was just listening to my stories over and over and cutting out everything that didn't belong, until I got to the point where every other line, it's a good story, right? There's a good laugh, there's a good pause afterwards. So really you go, I don't have 15 minutes of material, I have 5 minutes of really good material if I chop it all down and I do it right. So, you know, after I won a couple of those little competitions and I became reliable, I got asked to get on shows all the time, and I learned how to produce. And you get enough time that you can do 15 minutes and be a good opener. And you know, we started producing Christmas shows, or just opening for whoever came through. It takes 3 or 4 of you to do 90 minutes, and you can produce a Christmas show. So I actually got a ton of experience just doing that. And in Sudbury, there was a couple places that ran like a weekly Friday, Saturday night show, and they brought up people from down south. Like I met people like John Paul and K-Trev, all those guys. Like they were just coming through there on the weekly. So I got to keep working my material like every Friday, every Saturday night. They paid me enough that it was gas money, but I don't know, like comedy world is one of those things where if you get scooped up and you got like a good little regular spot, you can practice. you got to go eat shit sometimes, and that's how I got better, right? Is just by keep doing it and talking to comics, and you know, comics are good people for the most part, right? They'll give you good advice, and they'll teach you things. So I just got around good people and got good experience and got lucky a few times, and kept building from there, right?
Was it one of those things where like you would ask them for advice, or would they kind of like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Or like, how did you, like, you're so new, like, do you feel like I don't want to ask them, I don't want to bug them, but like at the
totally.
same time?
Well, and you know, I think comedy from my perspective is one of those things where you just got to watch and you got to go do it to learn. Like if somebody could just teach you and charge you a fee and teach you in 10 classes how to do comedy, you'd do it, right? But all of my favorite folks have been doing it 10 times harder than I've been doing it for the last few years, right? So proof's there and why they're better, right? And I mean, even lately for myself, very much committed to a couple different things to do on stage and been working at them. And I mean, I'm getting results, but it's hard. And it's, you know, one of them is talking to the audience, right? And crowd work. Oh,
you had some excellent crowd work at the last Get Forked show. That was fantastic.
I know, but even that, it's like inside, it's like, this is terrifying. And I don't know what I'm going to say, but I'm working at it, right? And but that's one of the things I've kind of committed to. And I see other people that are really good at it. They very much commit to engaging people. I even kind of tried to work at changing my tone on stage, because I find like when I try to engage people, it might be maybe my tone's a little off, where I'm like, people are like, this is not a conversation we want to have, where it's like, no, I want you to feel like it's a conversation you want to have. Like I want it to be fun and playful, right? So I don't know, you got to commit to working on those pieces. But again, it's not like I can watch a YouTube clip and someone's like, here's how you do crowd work, or you know, here's how you, Clint, with your tone and your character up there, can do crowd work. You got to go figure it out.
So let's talk about that for a second, because like you said, there's no way to teach crowd work, obviously, and I also don't think there's any way to properly teach comedy without actually just doing the job and learning. Like you can talk to like a comedian and like banter back and forth and you learn something that way. But like, I find that there's these comedians that say there are these rules in place for comedy. And I'm like, what fucking rules? it's such an open art form.
Yeah, I would say there's some, like one I always get chirped about is shorts on stage. And it's a ridiculous example, but
hey man, it gets hot, okay? I'd rather be like, just to counterpoint that, like no shorts on stage, cool. But if you're uncomfortable on stage, it's gonna come across as you're not being comfortable.
I always got told that you got to look like you're a pro up there no matter what, right? And to dress the role. And I always stick to that. But I'd say, going back to your question, like when I was younger and more eager to just ask seasoned comics, like, how do I do this? And they'd just be like, just keep writing. And I say I'm lazy, but that's where your comedy is, right? And that's where actually, if you keep doing it on a regular basis, and I find like one of the things I try to do, which it's terrible around here because nobody reads the news, is I try to write something about that day before I get on stage, right? Like it's a different muscle and it's throwaway material, but if I could do some crowd work and talk about something that happened that day on the news and get a laugh, it kind of exercises a muscle of being able to write on the fly, right? So I always try to do that. But I don't know, those are just different things, right? That I try to work on. But the whole writing piece of just write all the time, that's where you get better. You know, if I had to write about hockey tonight or I think about it like I got to do a private show for some company next week. And if they were like, we need you to make jokes about our boss, if I've been writing a stupid throwaway bit every week about the news or whatever happened to me, like that muscle gets exercised, right? And that's very much how I try to think about that writing.
I was talking to Evelyn on the podcast, and she was like, I think she said that she sits down and writes for 8 hours a day. And I was like, I must have heard that wrong, but like she sits down and sits for a few hours and just tries and writes, whether it be like comedy or short stories or that. And I'm like, how do you have the time? I mean, it's like when you have a full-time job, it is extremely difficult. And it's not that it's not impossible. It's just like, man, there's so many things that like society and life just puts in your way to like in terms of trying to actually make. I find that when I write best is like it's right before I'm going to bed and I just have like a weird idea coming by and I have to put like a note.
I think what Evelyn's doing there and what a good piece of that to do is just to empty out your head, right? I'm terrible. I'll get an idea and I'll be like, that's a funny idea. And I won't write it down and I'll just keep thinking about that funny idea all day and it never turns into anything else. And if I actually sat down and wrote on a piece of paper, I'd probably have like 10 or 15 other garbage tags to go with it and it would start to be something, right? And I had this new bit I've been telling on stage and I mean, I wrote it in one stroke and that's terrible. And they can't all be like that, but that's again my lazy writing of like, oh, here's a bit and it's a good one and I just wrote it out, but I don't want to work to write those other ones out, the hard ones, right? And that's just my admitted laziness. But that's the benefit of doing what Evelyn was talking to you about, because I find some of the stuff I've written out in the past that's just ideas or stories or that I might have tried on stage that didn't work will come back to you later, right? So if you write out, I wrote out this stupid bit about playing cowboys and Indians when I was a kid. And I wrote that out a couple of years ago. And I was on stage doing a bit last week and I'm like, that's where that fits. And I threw it in there and it was a little rough because I hadn't talked about it for a while, but it was still in my head. And I was like, ooh, that's where it fits, right? So, I mean, when someone's working like that and they're putting material away, it'll come back to you at some point. I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Do you get any pride in hosting your own event? Because I know you do Frankenfurters every Wednesday?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm getting busy and I try not to produce it every week. Like I try to produce it every other week, but I like that I can just get down there and talk to everybody and take advantage of that crowd work opportunity. And yeah, whatever's going on. I was talking about shooting Shatner into space last week. Whatever kind of piques my interest that day, whatever's new. I talk to you about that muscle of talking about whatever's going on or whatever feedback I'm getting when I'm on stage. Like I noticed that's been really beneficial for me. And then with some of the pro shows happening, like, yeah, I can go do my 10 or 15 minutes and keep honing that too, right? So it's two different kind of exercises there, but both beneficial.
Do you feel like it's all kind of coming together for you right now, or are you still struggling with like finding that spot in comedy?
Well, as far as my comedy coming together, I mean, there's always a bad set waiting for all of us. I kind of like where my writing is going these days and my ability to write a couple things and then perform, right? Like I like that. And I like the little scene we got going here in London, right? Like we got lots of good comics supporting each other, lots of young folks, and I like to be able to do that, right? Like I may always be corporate-y, whatever, doing my own gig on the side here and never make it anywhere in comedy, but it's what we like to do, right? So I'm very much enjoying that.
Well, I think that but I mean, like, just from like, I've been only here about a year and a bit now in London.
Yeah.
And yes.
I seen. I'm in my kid's room right now because that's the only place I can hide in my house. But I'm assuming she was like, "What the hell?"
And so like I have noticed that the comedy scene here is extremely young. And you're one of the more established, or not maybe established, like more of you've done it. You've got shows, you got gigs, you have your own show. You can tell that you've been doing it for a while because you have a good stage presence and good bits and everything. Do you ever go like with seeing so many young people in the scene? Do you ever feel like you should give them advice or anything like that? Or has anyone reached out to you for advice? Or does that bother you? Or is it weird?
Again, going back to what I was saying before, like I wouldn't ask somebody to tell me how to do it. I think the one thing I'm trying to do for the kind of comedy community here, and I hate to sound like a little philanthropist about it, but I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to make stage time for people. Like if somebody was to make it out of the crew, that's amazing, right? And if we can just create the time for people to keep working that stuff, that's all I'm trying to do. And I think most of my pals on the scene know that that's all we're trying to do. I don't tell anybody not to come on our shows, right? I'm trying to give time to everybody in the whole scene. I think I must be getting older. I know you talk about me being a little jaded in the comedy world, but when I was younger and running like my own little shows, like it used to really kill me when somebody was up there like working their stuff and it wasn't very good or it wasn't going very well for them. Not that I would take it personal so much against the show. It just, I don't know. I don't know how to take bad critical feedback in my own comedy. So when I'm producing a show, I get that same feeling. And now it's a lot different, right? I'm like, no, we all got to go up there and eat it and work our stuff. And I'm okay with not doing so well at an open mic on a Wednesday. And I'm a lot better about it putting on those kind of shows for my peers, because I know that's how we get better, right? And that's boring, stuffy comedy stuff. But I just have a different mindset about it, right? So I'm good about getting everybody to work here.
I will say this, like moving to London from St. John's, Newfoundland, and being a part of that comedy scene over there, like I've noticed that there is a much more, I don't know what's the word, a warm feeling in the comedians here, in my opinion. Like there's so many more shows, there's so many more spots for everyone, and there's so many more people trying to do it, which I think is awesome. And I think
we stuff down the cattiness a lot better than most comedy scenes. Comics are just catty people. Yeah, we are, and we're competitive. And I don't know. I enjoy that part of the scene though. Like, I don't know. There's some of us that we're pals enough that we can jab each other, but I very much like doing that too and being competitive.
See, I think that's where my problem might be lie with it, is that I'm not competitive when it comes to comedy, because I'm just like, anyone can do it, and everyone has equal opportunity to succeed and shit the bed.
It's golf though, right? I mean, you're competitive against yourself, right? Like,
yeah.
We all know the amazing high of going on stage and getting some laughs, but it takes about an hour for you to come down from that, for you to go back into your cycle of like, oh my God, my material sucks and nobody thinks I'm funny and I'm terrible, to all the anxiety you have before you get on stage, to doing material again, either it succeeds or fails, and then you go back into that whole cycle again, right?
What was it, last time I did your show at Frankfurters, Warsound made a joke about me and my wife, and she messaged me and she's like, sorry about that, thanks for being such a good sport. I'm like, no, that was fucking hilarious, like please, like, I feel like we should do a show where like we just roast each other, like comedians just like roast each other, because I feel like, and it's my opinion, but like I feel like we're all like too nice to each other sometimes.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for like when you're up there on the mic and you're at a show, and especially if it's half the room's comics and you throw a jab out there, like we're just I don't know, there's some camaraderie in there. And I know what you're talking about with the scene here. Like I feel like it's there. We don't all have to be pals, but we don't all have to be cliquish either, right? And I feel like there's enough of that out there that nobody's boycotting shows, and nobody's doing any of the stuff like that, or any of the ridiculous stuff that I'm sure happens in other scenes, right? Like I don't know, it's a good little supportive scene, like you said.
The idea of boycotting an art show that is meant to make people laugh and feel just
I can go feel bad about myself just by getting on stage. I don't need anybody's help to do that, right? So you know.
Oh my God. And so like you mentioned that like you've had to kind of change, you've had to do different sets for different audiences and everything, because obviously you're Indigenous, Native American. Like, do you have to actually do, like, when you're doing that show tonight at the Comedy Store where it's all Native American Indigenous comedians, do you have to like make it more of that genre of comedy? Is that a genre at all? I feel like totally, it shouldn't be a genre. I feel like that was very racist what I just said.
So I would say that there are things that we can all talk about on stage that we're going to relate to in community that you're just going to have no idea. So for example, tonight, I talk a lot about vaccinations in my stand-up, right? You know that from watching some of my bits. And I got stuff I want to try tonight about vaccines in our community that I don't know if it'll work. First Nations communities can be a little hesitant about vaccines, but we all line up when we get free dog rabies shots in the spring, right? Like it's ridiculous. And we all got a sore arm because it's the first time and the only time a year we put our dogs on a leash, right? but I don't know how I relate that story to non-Indigenous folks that have never been on the res, and I have no way of testing that type of material or even working that into a story before I try it out, right? So I mean, that's a bit of the
So
apprehension about doing a show like that, because I don't always get that opportunity to talk to that specific group of people, right? Even though a lot of my comedy is related to me working in First Nations communities, or my experiences, or just my experience as Clint in First Nations, right?
is there like, is that something that you may not use specifically, but like you and other comedians would want to maybe try and do like a comedy circuit on First Nation communities, or is that a thing that's been tried before?
Yeah, it's been tried before, and I worked with some Indigenous comics, like my pal Ryan McMahon, right, and done that, where you stop into communities and you get to open, and I think I don't know, I would hope, anyways, that's what I've been thinking, is that Janelle, the woman who's producing this show called Godland, like hoping to go meet these folks tonight and have a good time and say, like, how are we going to do this on a bigger scale, right? And I think that's what they're trying to do, and certainly don't want to scoop their theme there, but I certainly want to be a part of it, right? Or help it grow, right? And that's why I'm going. But I think there's totally an opportunity to do that. And the last thing I would say is I think we're almost ready to laugh at ourselves, right? And in saying that, you know, like I've always kind of been like, how do you write about some of these terrible things that have happened in community, or just what's happened, right? And I think it's getting easier, and it's getting easier to tell those stories, right, and more relatable. Like, I'm telling jokes about residential schools and Every Child Matters and stuff on stage, and people are okay with it, right? And it's not terrible humor that I shouldn't be doing up there. It's just it's delicate sometimes, that's all.
And you say that like you guys are, you say that you're kind of ready to make fun of yourselves, but I mean, name the number of like Holocaust jokes that have been made from Jewish comedians, or the number of slavery jokes that have been made from African American comedians. Like, I feel that's part of like not the healing process, maybe, but it's also essential, because then it takes the power away from the people that would want to take that stuff and use it for negative purposes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. I think we were talking about this before too. I was listening to a podcast, and the folks that made Reservation Dogs were on it, and those guys were talking about their comedy too, and about how they actually had to give non-Indigenous folks a bit of permission to laugh with them, right? And that, and I'm talking about the 1491s, right? And they were a sketch group, but they're like, yeah, when we started going out and doing shows for like non-Indigenous folks, like, we were just dying. And it's not that our material wasn't funny and that it wasn't good stuff. It was just like we didn't have a way to make that stuff funny in the show that people felt okay to laugh at it. And I've very much been thinking about that in my own writing lately, about like some of these topics are really blunt, right? And if I just go, well, bam, and I throw it on the table at a show. So if you'll notice, like when I talk about myself up there, I very much start in a way that's like, well, here's where I'm from. And it's kind of a very delicate introduction. And I almost like to create a bit of apprehension from folks. If you notice the way I do it, right? I'm like, I'm from here. And I'm like, well, no, I'm actually from here. And it creates a bit of tension in the room, and it's a good starting point for me to actually kind of give people a little permission to laugh at some of those bigger topics, because yeah, I like talking about the church and all that good stuff. And if people have already laughed a little bit about who you are, they can get on board with that, right?
Yeah, it adds a bit of danger to the comedy, and I always think a little bit of danger helps greatly, because then you're trying stuff like, I've only been doing it for like maybe a year and a half, 2 years, and like there's stuff I want to talk about. Then I'm like, I don't think I think I'm probably just too white to be able to try and get away with that sort of material. But
what I would say,
I think as
like,
time goes
writing
on, I'll get more confidence and more stage time to not maybe give a fuck. But as of right now, I'm probably just gonna keep it safe.
There's a way to do it. That's the whole piece about keep writing, is some of these things that I'm learning to talk about, or that I'll hopefully learn to talk about, there's a way to do it. I just haven't figured it out yet, right?
Yeah,
and that stage, and I even find with the lockdown of the last 2 years and people being stuck at home watching the news, I get a little more feedback on those Indigenous jokes because people have been watching the news. People have seen us marching in the streets. It's a little more relevant and in people's faces to get those little laughs, right?
So this is going to sound really inappropriate, but like with the residential school news having come out in multiple different areas, is does that helping momentum in terms of Native American comedy and issues and stuff like that, or like are you afraid that like the schools thing's going to happen and like people will just ignore it in 2 weeks time, which is like the news cycle it seems to be? Like, is that part of your
Uh,
job as a comedian, is to keep making those jokes
so
so it stays going?
yeah, for me personally, I like being able to talk about that up there and for it to be relevant and not in a way that I'm punching down at community or Indigenous people. I want to talk about it because it should be talked about up there. And, that's a good role for some of us, right? Some of
Mm.
us are better than others at it. I'm not going to say I'm great at it, but I'm trying, right? And keeping it relevant out there. I don't think it's going away. Since the summer, it's only got more traction. So let's keep talking about it. And I'm interested to see what my peers are talking about tonight when I get on stage. And I'm interested to hear their perspective about what they want to talk about
Yeah, that
and issues
you're
they
gonna.
want to address, right?
So you're like in this scenario, like you'd probably be sticking around after the show to have those conversations and like shoot the shit more so than usual.
Yeah, because like I guess one thing is I want to talk about those big issues that are relevant to non-Indigenous society, but we don't make fun of ourselves very well, right?
But why though? Because you guys have humor. You guys have all these
We're
fucking
big teasers.
stories.
We're big
You
laughers,
have
and
this culture. Like I feel like that. Like I feel like you mean like listen. I'll be first to admit, like I watch some black comedians and I have no idea what the fuck they're talking about, but everyone seems to be laughing at it because they're doing a show in front of their people. Um, and I mean, that's their culture, that's their society, that's how they raised. And you guys have that. And I can only imagine there's probably some fucking great stories out there and some great history that can be used in comedy.
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I mean our governance and just some of the histories of understanding who's where and why we're where we are. Those are great pieces. Um, but yeah, just the ability to make fun of ourselves and the things we do and the things we put our faith in. Like we should be making fun of ourselves more too. There's lots there.
Yeah.
And I even do it in my stuff. I talk about how I name my kids and I didn't really work out the way I intended.
Your joke about your name is fucking fantastic.
Yeah, I like that.
Every single time I laugh.
Yeah, so I mean, even that, like, I think I talk about how I tried to give my kids like traditional names, right? And I went sought out the advice of an elder, and none of it worked out. And I'm like, so and I would say you have this experience in your own work, right, of working with Indigenous people, and you're like, I'm like, how much of this stuff do I take at face value, and is it okay to question some of what they're saying? And I'm like, well, yeah, like it's okay to joke about that. I mean, I gave an elder some tobacco and asked for help with the name, and it's kind of funny that the name didn't work out. And just to be able to laugh at that and to go like, it is what it is, and we still love our kid, and she's got a great name. I don't know. It's all funny stuff, and you should be able to do that, right? My kid laughed. I told her the joke, and she's like, "That's hilarious."
Well, perfect transition because I wanted to talk to you about your kid. I know you probably signed an NDA, but so we can talk about briefly. But like, your daughter is going to be on CBC for a kids competition. Kind of tell me a little bit that process, if you can.
Totally. So it's not actually a
Oh, sorry.
competition.
What is your
So,
daughter's name first, so we can give her some props
so,
too?
so my youngest one, her name is Wasea, and just for reference, her name, that's the little one. Her name actually talks about a time in the morning, right when the sun starts to come up, and all the animals come to life and everything kind of wakes up. It's a kind of cool, special time in the morning, and it's a cool name. So that's her name. We got her into singing. Somebody here was offering some singing lessons, and she was kind of always into it. She's got some neat personality. And we signed her up. Although this lady doesn't just take people, she actually like screens them out, and she picks who she's going to teach. So she picked little Wasea and started teaching her. and took her to a couple of the local singing, whatever, festivals, Kiwanis. She competed. The long and the short is we kind of got a cold call from some folks that were looking for kids for a show for CBC. We sent them some videos of her singing and some of her antics on TikTok because, you know, my kids are into the TikTok thing.
I still don't know TikTok, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, I'm still catching up with Instagram, right? But they scooped her up and they're like, your kid can sing and she's got a great personality and we want to put her on this kid's show. So she got scooped up. I guess the producer who I looked up at the time, big deal, big music producer, U2, all these other big bands, produces all kinds of stuff, wanted to do a kid show. So I guess what makes it a little different is they bought up the rights to a bunch of pop music, right? Which doesn't necessarily happen because it's expensive. So, I mean, my little pal's learning like Rihanna songs that are, you know, on the top 40 stuff because she's singing all the current stuff. So she shot 26 episodes of a kid show that's pretty much like the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, where they have scenes where they're interacting and hanging out with the host and they're singing songs and they're jumping around and dancing. And through a bit of chatting with Saya, they realized she's Indigenous. So one of the episodes, she's actually hanging out with some of her traditional regalia and talking about some of her favorite foods and some of the words she knows and how she likes to hang out with her Nokomis, right? So built some of the good family elements right into the show.
So you've talked about this after some comedy show, and like you can tell, you can see the pride on your face every time. You're like, how the fuck did I make this such a talented child, sort of thing?
Totally. And I've very much taken that approach of just being like, I'm just, if I had boys and I was a hockey dad cheering at the rink, it's the same thing, right? Like she's in the union, she gets paid for this now, and she very much rolls with mom as like her agent, right? Even though we have an agent now. But yeah.
So is your wife going to become your agent then eventually? It's like a family business.
Be supportive of, well, you know, if I go out and do a show and it causes, I get $50 on a Friday night, she can have her 10%. I don't care. Yeah,
so
we'll
like
talk when I start making it.
So when you have your daughter having the success and you're also in the entertainment business and comedy, like, are you just kind of letting her soak it all in, or are you trying to like kind of like give her some words of advice or like red flags to look out for?
So yeah, two things we very much had to learn about all those red flags and how to get her in the union and all the rules we have to follow now around kids and employment and the work stuff. And the other piece, yeah, like I told her exactly that. First day she was going for shooting and she was in the studio. I'm like, you need to soak this all up, kid. It's only going to be 6 weeks and you're going to think it's amazing and it'll be done before you know it. And I've kind of always had that with big shows, right? You lean into a big show coming up and you know there's going to be 500 people in the audience and it's going to be amazing. And next thing you know, you're sitting there and it's done and it's all over. So she very much took that advice and I think she appreciated it, right? Because we talked about it all through the experience, about everything she was up to. And man, she did everything. She sang in the studio. I went and seen the stuff on set. I'm like, this kid is actually on like a real big, huge TV set. It was green screening the whole thing. It was pretty amazing, right? So
did you cry at any point, just out of pride for when she
oh
started
totally
performing?
man, when we had to go in the studio and watch the first cut, I was like, man, there's my kid. And it was totally like, you know, flipping on, like, I don't know, I'm not used to it yet, but I'm totally going to be flipping on the TV going like, oh, there's the kid again, right? Because it's just going to be on repeat forever, right? So yeah, like, I'll get over it.
It's like, guys, come on, we're having a party at our house. It's like, what are we watching? Dude, we've watched this 3 times already. I don't care. Sit down and watch it.
At my Super Bowl party, yeah, at the intermission, we won't be watching the halftime show. We're going to switch over to CBC to watch my kid, yeah.
The halftime show is going to be the TV turned off in a live production of the and it's going to be you doing 5 minutes and her ending this halftime show with it.
And I don't know how much, like, my influence of, you know, like what I like to talk about and what I like to do influences those kids. But yeah, we like to talk and be goofs here just as much as you might hear me talking when I'm out with you guys, right? Like there's not much we don't say and do around the kids that we wouldn't share otherwise. So it's been interesting. I talk about it on stage about having your own opportunity to raise your kids in a different way. And I don't know, I think some of that is that openness and being able to let your kids do and act however they please has been super beneficial for me, right? Like I got another kid that's trans and safe house for that to happen, right? And I mean, half of that's been educational for me, but the hard work we did to have like a freewheeling house where everything goes made it safe for all that to happen, right? So like all those things have been super beneficial.
So you said that's been an educational point for you, and I think Jamie Lee Curtis said that her daughter has come out as trans as well. And again, it's a learning experience sort of thing. It seems like you're always kind of learning, whether it be in Sudbury or London and comedy, or your daughter's show, or your daughter's trans. But like some people would be like freaking the fuck out about it. Like, I don't want to learn so much, but you seem to be able to do that and wanting to do that. Is there anything about your past or anything that you've learned from your past that has made you realize that you should just always be open to learning new things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have been learning a little bit about my younger years lately. Somebody sent me to the doctor and they're like, told me I had to start taking care of myself. And the doctor's like, you need to go talk to somebody else, right? Like go talk to a therapist, go talk to a crazy person. I had a super fun upbringing as a young guy, right? And I would say, to answer your question, one of the interesting things I've learned about myself is I don't have a whole lot of identity. So in hearing you say that to me, I go, I very much enjoy being a chameleon and having a million tools in the toolbox. And when you describe me like that, that's just me soaking up all those little things. And it's just like comedy. You write out all your stories and you keep them in the book because someday you're going to use them. And I very much think about that, like my learning experiences and everything I get exposed to. It's either awesome tools you're going to suck up for life, or you never know, one day you're going to have to let that loose on stage and you're going to want to talk about it. And then you've heard me actually start to bring that stuff on stage, right? About talking about my kid being trans and some of my struggles in life. Like that stuff can be funny too. And I think that's the cooler thing. And I brought my kid to shows. And that's the one thing that she's really fascinated by, he's fascinated by, and I'm fascinated by about comedy is that we can talk about anything up there and make it really funny and make people enjoy it. That's a huge gift for me.
You mentioned tools, like having all these tools in your tool shed or toolbox. I want to talk about the one tool that I feel like you take great advantage of, and that is the use of marijuana. Because you don't drink and you come to all these bar shows and everything, and you're still one of the funniest people there. But like you don't get blackout drunk, you don't forget, you don't get into certain mischievous things because of alcohol. But like you're just like a relaxed, calm, like, oh, I'll have my edibles, I'll smoke my weed and just be chill. Like, has that as a tool helped you not just in comedy, but also like in your personal life as well?
Yeah,
Like,
on a
so like
couple levels.
let me just ask, like, did you smoke a lot of weed when you were heavier, or were you drinking back then and then?
So I was a mess when I was a teenager, right? I was a bad drunk and I was using all kinds of everything, and I was into a lot of bad stuff, and I wasn't a very productive human being, right? Like I was just smashing it through life. And I quit drinking when I was 22. And I stayed like that until my late 30s. And it worked for me. And I started with the weed again like late in my 30s, into my 40s. And I don't know, it's a good harm reduction thing. It's good for my pain, and I like to enjoy life too. I mean, I'm not that opposed to having a good time, but yeah, alcohol does not work for me. I was a bad drunk, and I know if I go back to it, I'm a bad drunk. I don't know. It's just a chill thing, and yeah, I like that people like to make fun of me when I'm sitting there with my water. Sometimes I had a good interaction last time I was at the show on stage. Someone was leaning into me because I was drinking my water, but yeah, I like to be a bit of a cannabis advocate, man. I'm good for that, and my experience is if you can get people to put their stigma down a little bit and give it a try, like I know people that they don't drink as much anymore because they're like, hey, we'll eat one of those gummy bears on a Friday night, go out and have a fun time and not be hungover and not lose control and not do all those harmful things that some of us can do when we drink too much booze, right? So
I had last Thanksgiving, which is just what, 3 weeks ago. I'm seriously considering cutting back on any alcohol. It was not a great morning. So I know what you're talking about. Look,
I don't miss any of that stuff, brother.
yeah, but marijuana as a tool, I find, like you mentioned it, like it's great for healing, like in terms of joint pain, body aches, that sort of thing. Also in terms of the mind, it does seem to open you up for like creativity. Like I can enjoy a film a little bit more if I'm a little bit stoned, sort of thing, right? So like, has that helped your comedy at all, or is it just an addition to what you've already do?
I don't think I necessarily need any of that to write any better or perform a certain way. I think, I don't know, for me, everybody seems to think I'm super chill. Just something I've worked at in my life. I don't like that aggressive stuff. So I mean, but you know what's funny though is, and I would ask you this back, because I feel like I'm not that person on stage, right? That my stage voice and the person I am up on stage is not the chill person that that likes his edibles and likes to be chill. I almost feel like I'm a little more aggressive up there, right? And I don't know
You
why
are,
that
yeah. No,
is.
there is a difference. You are a bit more of like a poke the bear type personality when you're on stage.
Totally, and that is almost a little bit more of like a throwback to who I was 20 years ago, right?
He's
More,
still there.
I would even say more my boozing days of like, don't mess with me. I don't know, and that's just I would say that's part of what I've learned about that crowd work too, though, right? And I've had people just straight up say that to me, is like, don't ever look like you're not in control up there, and actually have people worried that maybe you're going to talk to them next, and that's kind of a good way to control things. Like, I don't want it to be that interaction to be not a good thing. I just want people to be on their toes a little bit more than me, right? Like, I think the thing we all worry about up there when we're on stage is that we're going to get out funny by somebody in the crowd, or we're just going to hit a dead end and it's going to be terrible. But I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for, like, we're controlling the wand of the symphony up there. You just need to be a little more confident about doing it, right?
So let me ask you about that, because like I've noticed that, like specifically here at a few shows, whether it be Poachers or Lou Dogs or 765 or Black Diamond or Get Forked, some of the comedians here will kind of freak out over there being a loud table, right? You're like, oh, I wish that this table would leave. Like, I hate that they came here. But isn't that part of the job of comedians, to be able to win those people over and like shut them down and make them leave? Don't like, am I missing? Am I getting the right point here? Like, I feel like that's part of the journey, is being able to overcome those obstacles. Like, it can't come. You can't have a perfect comedy show all the time. And it'd be ridiculous to try and do that.
No, I agree, but I would say to you, and some of the great comics I've seen are like, they're not paying attention because you're not being funny. And that's not me criticizing any of our pals on the scene, but totally, if there's a table full of people talking, they're not interested in you, and that stuff spreads like wildfire, right? When you start losing them, you start losing them. And we were talking a little bit about learning earlier, and I think somebody pointed it out to me. Like I said, I've been doing comedy for a while now, and somebody said to me one day, hey, Clint, I don't know, I felt like I had a bad set, and they're like, then you never lose them. Like, they're never not listening to you. They might not have been roaring with laughter, but you never lose them. And I don't know, I thought a lot about that comment, and I think about it when I'm on stage now, and it's kind of given me a little better appreciation for making it through the story. Like, I think I used to tell shorter stories to get to the joke because I didn't like the silence. And I don't know, it's probably one of those grass is greener on the other side, but I feel like my jokes are shorter and punchier, and that's just more because I can't handle the silence on stage, and I'm trying to get better at that, about looking around and going like, okay, I'm halfway through the story, they're not supposed to laugh here, this is what's supposed to be happening, I'll get there, right? And that's just, I'm not a public speaker, and I never was, so like, those are all things that you only learn from doing it over and over and over and getting comfortable up there, right? So I almost feel like a little behind because I didn't start out as a public speaker, and I even know some of the guys on the scene are like public relations people, or some of these people have public speaking skills already. Those are things I had to learn along the way, bumping my head to go like, stop having a panic attack in the middle of that joke. They're not supposed to laugh there. And actually, if you look and pay attention, they're all listening because they all know that they're going to get to something, right? So I don't know. That's just having some self-awareness. But yeah, I very much used to just be climbing the walls when the laughs wouldn't come, right? And I didn't know how to navigate that.
Yeah, I think that's something that we all have to kind of like learn. And even like the best of the best, like
Be okay with it, yeah.
Like, but like they're good. Like that's why like when you see a special, it's good just because they've tried those jokes and they've bombed and they've had to work their ways around like making it good sort of thing, or they just cut whatever the fuck they don't want in it.
But I would say that advice of keep writing every day and keep writing all the time makes it so that when those guys that are that good go, I'm going to do a bit, they don't even put the pen down. Like you hear some of them, right? Some of the real good pros out there, like, I don't write anymore. I just get up there and talk. It's because they've written so much in their lives that I can write a bit in one blush now because I've been doing it so long. And I'm not saying that about me, but some of those pros, like that's what you get from being a writer every day.
And speaking about pros, you did mention you wanted me to talk about this. Is that you had you sent me a message that a memory from 7 years ago where like you had a message from, was it Mike Washington? No, Mike
McDonald.
Mike McDonald. Who, yes, when I saw the name, I was like, how do I know it? And then like, just for like constantly. What were you said that you posted the memory and you put a blurb behind it too. It's like, what was that experience like? Because he is a very experienced and well-traveled comedian.
So Mike was on Just for Laughs for like 25 years straight, right? Like that guy is like Canadian comedy, and if anybody is around the same age as me in their 40s, that guy's Canadian comedy. Like I used to watch that guy on Comedy at Club 54 and Just for Laughs, like all that stuff when I was a kid, that when I never had any thoughts of trying to do stand-up. Like we all know who that guy is in Canadian comedy. And I knew that guy was sick. Like when I started doing comedy, I knew he wasn't well. And I remember people posting about him, like Mike's sick and he needed a liver transplant. And he actually came back to Canada because he was living in the States. So whatever, I'm like a year into being an open micer, a year and a half into being an open micer. And I had run like a couple small shows in North Bay. And I'm sitting around one evening with my wife and my kids, and I got a Facebook message from Mike McDonald asking me if there's any shows he can jump on in North Bay. And of course, I was like, man, I could put a show together last minute, right? Like I was like, I could do it. And I'm like, oh, that's just stupid, right? But like if I had like anything more than a day's notice, like of course I would have put a show together, right? But I think he was on the mend from his liver transplant, and he was in town doing a corporate show. And I'm like, oh, there's no show, Mike. But like, that's crazy. He reached out to me, and he's like, well, why don't you pick me up after my corporate gig, and we'll go out and grab a bite to eat. So I told my wife, I'm like, do you know who this guy is? She's like, I don't care. What are you're going out? Okay, see you later. Bye. Right. So I picked him up at his hotel, and we went downtown and we sat at a restaurant for 2 hours, and he bought me a steak, and I talked to him about everything and anything he would talk to me about comedy. Like I remember I asked him, for whatever reason, I remembered a bit he did about crossing like a 6-lane freeway after a gig to get to a Burger King in the middle of the night. And I remember asking him about that, and he's like, oh, it totally happened. And he told me the whole story about it, and where he was and what he was up to. But yeah, it was great. And at the time I got to talk to him about all those things I didn't know about comedy, and told me all kinds of great stories. And I dropped him off, and that was the end of that. But it was just kind of one of those weird comedy stories where a guy dropped in and he said, yeah, I looked up comedy in North Bay, one of the only names that came up, so I thought I'd message you. But otherwise, it was kind of a weird experience. And for somebody to watch that guy all my life as a little kid, like told my buddies about it, and they're like, oh, yeah, so.
That's like that time I had it wasn't just me, but it was me and a few other wrestlers that we had after a show we had dinner with Jake the Snake Roberts. Him just
totally. It's a great experience,
and just
right? You
him
just get to hear about it.
just him sharing stories from the road, like back in WF of Hogan and Macho Man. It's like, oh my God, this guy's like, and like, I don't remember any of the actual fucking stories he said because I'm just like, this is Jake the Snake fucking Roberts, and he's talking to
and
us.
I wish I had better
Like,
stories to tell about Mike too, right? But he told me about comedy. He actually talked to me about trying to write cleaner jokes and writing my jokes. But it was a great experience. Like, I was just happy to be a fly on the wall and hear from the guy, right? So,
well, Clint, I've been very happy to be a fly on the wall for this conversation. Great segue.
no, I appreciate it, man. I actually at first I was like, no, I don't. Somebody wants to hear my stupid stories, but I appreciate you asking me, man. It's good to chat and good to get some of these stories out.
Yeah, man, and like the comedy scene here in London, Ontario is booming, and the more that I can get people on here, the more we can get interacting and doing stuff and having shooting ideas around and everything. So that's what the goal of this podcast is: share stories with interesting people, and you are one of those interesting people that I are in my life right now. So thank you for being on the podcast. What are your social media handles, if you have any? I can't imagine that you have many. And do you have any other bigger shows coming up that you'd like to promote because it's coming out this week?
Well, like I said, nobody's gonna know, but I'm gonna be at the Comedy Bar tonight, headlining the Got Land show. We do the Frankenfurters open mic every week at 9:30, and then we run the pro show every second Friday. And if you want to get at me, most of my social media handles are just Sly Nish, SLYNISH, because I'm a Sly Nish, right? So.
And with that, we'll end the podcast. Thanks so much for being on, man.
Right on, brother. Thanks for asking. Cheers.
What's going on, guys? I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Clint Couchie. He is a guy that I go to for a lot of advice in terms of comedy in the London, Ontario area. So it's very much worthwhile checking out him and all the things that he's up to and got going on. If you want to get in touch with him, you can find him on Instagram and Twitter at SlyNish. SLYNISH, and reach out to him and see if you want him for a show, or if you have any advice or need any advice on comedy, reach out to him, and he's a wealth of knowledge for us. So until later on this week when we have another very special episode for the Hello How Are You Today podcast, I'll see you guys down the road. Cheers.